Hi, this is Nick Burbules. I published a short paper recently in educational theory called Why Philosophy of Education is Basic to Philosophy. It is built around three arguments, and I'd like to give a brief summary of those arguments in this video today. It's always bothered me that people consider philosophy of education to be the poor cousin of real philosophy. Or that philosophy of education is merely the application of philosophical concepts or theories or tools of analysis to educational problems. I think that that's partly true, but it's an incomplete understanding of what philosophy of education can contribute to philosophy itself. So I have three arguments in the paper. One is, if you look at various canonical philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, Rousseau, even the later Wittgenstein in the Investigations, you see them engaging in serious reflection on educational issues as part of their doing real philosophy. They don't think that they're doing something separate called philosophy of education as the first argument, and I give examples in the paper. The second argument, I think about a colleague of mine who likes to say it's the job of the philosopher to identify certain ideals about what human beings can become or do or know, or what society can become. And it's the job of the philosopher to identify those ideals, but it's the job of the educator to figure out how to actually achieve them. I think that that's a mistake for two reasons. One is, if you don't have at least some conception already, at least implicit assumptions about how those goals or ideals can be attained, how do you even know that they are attainable? And what's the point of identifying them as goals or ideals if in fact they're not attainable? So I don't think the educational question is an entirely separate issue. The second argument there is that I think when one starts reflecting on how to actually accomplish these goals, these ideals of knowledge, value, morality, becoming how to build a better society, then those goals and ideals themselves are changed by thinking about the educational processes by which they might be attained. And then the third argument of the paper is that the actual practice of philosophy itself depends on certain kinds of conditions, both social conditions, but also conditions and dispositions in individual people that makes the doing of philosophy possible. And therefore, it's not somebody else's problem to think about those educational issues. The actual doing of philosophy itself depends upon the success of educational processes. Kathleen Knight Abowitz and I call this situated philosophy, the idea of thinking about philosophy in a way that is self-reflexive about the conditions that make philosophy itself possible. I think especially these days, it is hard to think about taking those conditions both at the level of society and the level of the individual for granted. And in fact, I think we're facing a sort of crisis in contemporary society about what happens if educational processes don't and can't develop successfully those conditions of reasoning, conditions of the desire to become a moral person, the desire to think about building a better society and thinking about that society in certain ways. If those educational conditions aren't in place, then the doing of philosophy as a general activity isn't any longer possible. So those are the three arguments. I hope this entices you to go and read the paper. And thank you very much for your interest in my work. Bye-bye.